My name's Paulette Battisti. I work at the United Steelworkers Education Membership Development Department, and I am a very proud woman of steel. I would like to welcome you all to this truly historical event in honor and celebration of all of our sisters who have paved the way, honor and celebration, and who has challenged the status quo, gotten into good trouble, and given their voices to the movement. We are excited to get started. But first, I'm grateful that we can get together on platforms such as these during the pandemic. It means that we can join together from different geographical locations. And tonight we have those from Canada, the United States, Mexico, and the United Kingdom. So I'm given a different kind of land acknowledgement. Please take a moment to connect yourself by looking at or thinking about the land that your body rests on. Think about it. What do you know? What do we still need to learn about it? And especially those who came before us. Who were they, the first people on this land? Who have been the stewards of this land? Who have worked the land? Do you know? How can we thank them for caring for the water, the earth, the creatures? Do you know their story? Was this land stolen for settlements by others? Is it covered by a treaty? Was that treaty honored? Was that land stolen for settlement by others? Is it covered by a treaty, and was it honored in our Indigenous people asking for support from others? Let's commit ourselves and our unions to taking real action to advance the rights of Indigenous people and others that are poor or dispossessed. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the director of the Women of Steel, Ann Fleener. Ann?
Thank you, Paulette and Pam, and thank you to those working behind the scenes to make this event possible. I'm Ann Fleener Gitlin, Director of Women of Steel, and I'm so happy you could join us for this International Women's Day and March Women's History Month. This timeline depicts the key events in our union's history as women demanded their place in the workforce in the union. The early women's caucuses, the 22nd USWA convention where women delegates met for the first time to discuss their concerns, the 1992 convention where the first Women of Steel resolution was entered into the record that urged districts to form women's committees, and subsequently in 2005, the USW Constitution was changed to require local unions with female members to form a women's committee as a standing, constitutionally mandated committee of the local union. Today, Women of Steel is a reflection of the contributions by many who came before us. It's not a single story or path, but starts and stops, hopes and challenges, joy and tears, those who supported us and those that wanted us to fail. It's a story of those that feared change and those that knew change would make the union stronger. We will begin with readings based on the stories of two sisters that faced challenges, but stood up and helped set us on our path. I can only imagine how proud they'd be to see what their efforts have helped build. Then we have a panel of those that have walked this path and those that are continuing the work of the women's movement. They are small, but reflective subset of a very large movement. We want to hear your stories too, and at the end of the evening, we'll have a chance for all to speak. The chat feature will be monitored throughout the Zoom event. If you have stories or questions, put them in chat. If you have a quick 1-minute story or remark you want to share, put your name in the chat with the word story or remark beside it, and you'll be invited to speak. If you have a question, put it in chat. We'll make every attempt to get all questions answered in the time frame allotted. We're hoping that this is just the beginning of building a women's oral history project for our union. So I want to thank our panel for being here this evening, and I ask that each panelist introduce yourself as you reflect on your experience as a union sister. Now, Sarah Whalen.
Hi, sorry about that. Technical issues. My name is Sarah Whalen, and I'm the current Vice President at Local 4120 at the University of Guelph in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I sit on the District 6 Human Rights Committee and am honored to sit on the newly formed International LGBTQ+ Advisory Committee. The story that I'm about to tell is adapted from the experiences of our sister, Bonita Clark. Seven years of whistling and leering and demeaning comments. 7 years of walking across the unlit yard, across the railway tracks, and into the unlocked washroom to find feces spread on the seat and graffiti on the walls. 7 years of sharing shower facilities with little more than a curtain between the men and women. Management told me to shut up and enjoy the free show. So in 1985, I filed complaints against Stelco with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Took some time, but the Steelworkers finally stood with me. I'm proud to say today, the United Steelworkers has a policy that makes it clear that harassment isn't a part of the job. I'd like to introduce Emily Jefferson.
Good evening. My name is Emily Jefferson, and I work at Steelworkers headquarters in the Women in Steel and Civil and Human Rights Department. And I am honored to bring you the words of Ola Kennedy. I became a member of the United Steelworkers of America in 1959 when I went to work at Hammond Valve. There was a lot of work to do in this union, a lot of work to do. I became active in the ad hoc committee in 1968 or 69. I was very impressed with them from the start, but the lack of representation by Blacks in the union really bothered me. We traveled all over the country to promote Blacks into meaningful positions. I was also at the founding of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. It is a rank and file movement of Black members and those that support us. We needed our own organization because there was so much repressive legislation and the right wing was trying to take away everything we had won. I also helped organize the Coalition of Labor Union Women, also known as CLUE. It was just so much work. On the shop floor, one of the hardest things was to be a woman. We were told that's a man's job. We had a long way to go. We tried everything and ultimately filed a suit with the Human Relations Commission. We started a women's group in 1974 or so. And we didn't call ourselves a caucus because caucus denotes union politics. We just tried to get things done, and I had people that I could count on. Women were always more involved than men in my local. You'd find women doing most of the work. We took every office but presidency. I run and come within 6 votes, but it was just too much for me to overcome the company and their collaboration. We do have a District 31 Women's Caucus. I think like most caucuses, they come about because of a need. In Title VII and the consent decree and the women going into mills and non-traditional jobs. They met with so many problems. We thought that maybe we better get a caucus to deal with this. The men had this, you ought not be here syndrome, and the women were really up against it, the things that men did and said. My daughter went into the mill, and I saw what the bosses tried to do to her, tried to force her to sign a paper that said she couldn't do the work. She went to her local and its civil rights committee and said, my mama's been belonging to this union for 15 years and very involved, and I know that I shouldn't sign this paper. She forced the union to support her. See, women are courageous enough to take them on. So through the caucus, we thought maybe we started dreaming, what if we had a women's department or a Department of Women's Affairs? So we started organizing and getting together, and we started getting complaints, and we really got an education on the problems that women were having in the mills. We got involved because women were very seldom ever appointed to staff, and there were no women on the International Executive Board. In 1969, I wrote a letter to the International saying, women's experiences and dedication is being ignored by the United Steelworkers of America. This disregard is a loss to the union. Women have played an important role in building our union at the grassroots levels, on picket lines, serving as local union officers, ringing doorbells in national elections, serving on community agencies, and making other sacrifices. We feel that women should be considered for staff and other meaningful positions in this union. We dreamed, we educated, we agitated, and we organized. We thought, maybe. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Roberta Wood.
Hello, I was hired at Steel Southworks in Chicago in 1974 as a laborer in the alloy bar mill. I was one of thousands of women. You wait for the slideshow, it's not starting yet. I was one of thousands of women, Black, white, and Latina, who went to work in the steel industry in the 70s. I fought hard for that job, but I also know that the struggles of African-American steelworkers laid the basis for the affirmative action program that let us women come into the mills. My thinking at the time was it was a real job, and I wanted a real job, and a real job meant a job for the long haul, a job with real pay where I could really support myself. And it meant more than just the money, it meant respect for yourself and from others. So a lot has been said, and Ola's words say a lot about the struggles we went through, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I also want to acknowledge the pleasures of working in the mill, learning a trade, the satisfaction of working with your hands, being part of an enormous collective human enterprise of human labor, being in a union, and most of all, the enduring solidarity and love you forge in a workplace. Next slide, please. So in 1976, some of us newbies in the Gary, Chicago area, along with a few veterans like Ola, and thank you, Emily, for bringing her words to us, formed the District 31 Women's Caucus in the union's largest district at the time, the Gary, Chicago area. We published 23 editions of our newsletters. We reached out to women through mailings, by handing out at plant gates, at conferences, in locker rooms, and our supportive brothers passed on to sisters in their plants and mills. Next slide, please. Newsletters were a thing, and so it wasn't just in District 31. Here's some newsletters. One's from Edgar Thompson work. Here's another from Granite City. The newsletters chronicled our struggles. Next, please. Steel companies were required to hire a quota of women, but they got around that by increasing the probationary period from 30 to 90 days and used that as a revolving door to fire especially Black women. And we fought that, even though it was difficult. We were kept out of the trades. We suffered sexual harassment when we didn't even have a word for that, a term for that at those times. Next slide. Maternity leave was a focal point. No room for babes at Bethlehem. Bethlehem Steel, if you were suspected of being pregnant, you had to report to the plant hospital, take a pregnancy test, and then they put you on unpaid leave and cut off your medical benefits. Next slide. Sometimes you had to walk a mile to go to the bathroom, and the locker rooms were filthy, didn't have hot water, but they might have fleas. We knew the union was our best tool, but it wasn't too sharp of a tool sometimes. We didn't have women national officers, almost none on the staff, not one in our whole district. In my local, no women officers, not on any committees, grievers, stewards. Our problems were not on the agenda, and it wasn't always easy for Ola and me to convince others that the union was the solution, not the problem. But we went to meetings together. We learned Robert's Rules of Order. Our caucus met every month. We had to meet at a hotel because we didn't have access to union halls. We raised money to charter a bus to go to DC to testify before Congress on the maternity legislation. Next slide, please. And we ran for office and we won. Many of us won. Next slide. We wrote and circulated resolutions on the issues important to us. New slide. We wrote a resolution to the International Convention in 1980, circulated it to locals across the country. And here's the women, next slide, lining up to speak on that resolution. The first one in line is Alice Perella, the president of my local, Local 65, the first woman president of a basic steel local. Next slide. Our resolution called for two things: an International Department on Women's Affairs and a union-wide women's conference. But this was 1980. The resolution did not pass. It was referred to the executive board. However, I see somewhere along the line it did pass, and here we are. Next slide. At the end of the 70s, we experienced a pandemic of plant closings. It was fatal to our caucus, but not to our cause. I want to thank you all for carrying on. Next slide, please. And I'm a proud member of SOAR and so happy to hear and share all of your stories. Thank you. And the next, now I'd like to pass the mic, to my sister, Marlene Gow.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Marlene Gow, and I'm a retired staff representative from the Canadian National Office. But my journey with the Women of Steel began in my home local, Local 6709 in Barrie, Ontario, in the late 80s. At that time in Ontario, across Canada, and probably the entire union, the USW was very highly male-dominated organization, and thereby not an easy place for women to find their space and thrive. In local unions, usually women held the typically female position of recording secretary. As a result, they often did not get access to education and opportunities that would support and encourage them to take on other roles so they could raise issues important to women in their workplaces and in their locals. This was only one of the struggles going on. At that time in District 6, which is Ontario and the Atlantic provinces, there was a small group of sisters who had managed to get some opportunities, which allowed them to take on roles in the larger union, such as volunteer organizers, instructors, and doing some special project work. These women often found themselves frustrated that when permanent staff positions opened up, women were generally overlooked, even when they had the same knowledge and experience as the men who were able to secure the jobs. This was sort of problem number 2. So the women in the district strategized and worked together to lobby and apply pressure to the district office to take steps to address the issue of unequal access for the sisters. We knew that in order to see the changes in the entire union structure, we had to begin by building the base of women so we could gain that power. After much discussion in the district, it was agreed to initiate some sort of education program to address and resolve these issues. We applied for and were granted funding from the Ontario Women's Secretariat to help with the development and rollout of a program. And as this was a grant, the guidelines called that we would hire a woman from outside of the USW to work with the sisters in the district to develop this program. Dana Green was the woman's name, and she did meet with sisters across the district to ensure that the course that she was writing would actually meet our needs and be a good fit for the steelworkers. Once the course was developed, it was piloted with some rank and file sisters in Toronto for their input and their feedback. The next step was to train facilitators for the new course. And that's where I came in. I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate. It was a bit of a stressful week, as some portions of the content we felt actually didn't fit well to our specific environment. But we got through it and came out with a program and a name that we all felt confident we could move out across the district. But what we had misjudged was the amount of pushback that we were going to get from the men in the union. They were not happy to see what they perceived as women wanting to take over the union. In fact, at one point, we seen men of steel buttons being made and distributed. But as we women do, we persevered and we communicated to and with our brothers, saying we didn't want to take over the union. We only wanted to create our own space and find our voice in the union. We stressed to them how much more we could all accomplish if we actually worked together and supported each other. Over time, we made inroads, but it was a very tough time. We worked with the allies we built as we moved forward and asked them to carry the message forward to their other brothers in the union. One of the things we did was to track the women who took the course to see if, in fact, we met our goal of having more sisters feel empowered and confident enough to take positions in their local unions. We were thrilled to find that this was happening all across the district. We knew in time, those who choose to move outside of their locals and take on roles in the larger union would meet with greater success having the support of a larger group of sisters to provide assistance. This would lead to us meeting another of our goals of changing the face of the union at all levels. From there, we began to move the program into other parts of the country, training sisters from those regions to facilitate the course so we could ensure as much access as possible. The rest is the history we're hearing about tonight. I'm so proud to have been a small part of a course which has become one of the most important programs in the USW. If you look across the union, most of the women who hold or have held staff positions at all levels are products of the Women of Steel program. We have much more work to do, but I know Women of Steel will never stop moving the bar forward. I look forward to helping in whatever way I can, because even as I am retired, once a woman of steel, always a woman of steel. I now turn it over to my sister and friend, Nancy Lesson.
Thank you, Marlene. I'm Nancy Lesson, proud member of Steelworkers Organization of Active Retirees. In the late 80s, I was a local union president, often presenting workshops at Steelworkers Health, Safety, Environment conferences with 800 men and 20 women, or 500 men and 10 women, an imbalance that's a risk factor for harassment. I found myself, as too many did in similar situations, a survivor of sexual assault. It was 1991. I asked to see the international sexual harassment policy. There was none. I went to find the union's Old Girls Network to make change. I found Sandy Sutton in then District 31, president of a basic steel local. I told her my story. She said, "I'm so sorry, but we've been waiting for someone who's willing to speak out." A few years back, she'd spoken to International President Lynn Williams about sexual harassment and discrimination, and he said, "What you need is a grassroots movement. When you have a grassroots movement to force things to change, things will change." She said, "Let's go build us a grassroots movement." By phone, fax, and mail, we found each other. We discovered Sue Milling and Marlene Gow and learned about the Canadian Women of Steel course. We made a list of what we wanted and presented it to President Williams: a union-wide anti-harassment policy, an international union women's leadership task force to assess concerns and barriers and help implement needed programs and policies, and the Women of Steel course in the US. By June 92, we won the union-wide anti-harassment policy. To keep pressure on, we drafted a resolution for the 92 International Convention to create the International Union Women's Leadership Task Force. To get our resolution taken up, we'd need a representative group of locals submitting it. Sister Sandy said, "I've done a bunch of favors for some of these big steel locals. Time to call in my chits." The Women of Steel resolution went in from Canadian and US locals, including some from Basic Steel. A final resolution created a committee to prepare a US version of the Women of Steel course, but no International Women's Leadership Task Force. We held a strategy meeting at convention and decided to enthusiastically support the resolution, but call for the task force in our floor speeches. When the resolution was read, every microphone on the floor was lined with sisters and brothers offering universal support. President Williams appointed an 11-member Women's Education Development Committee, including 4 local union sisters, Sandy and I among them. We went to Buffalo in November 92 and had the honor of having 2 fabulous local union leaders from Canada, Sisters Carol Landry and Josephine facilitate the course. We experienced the magic. The course focused on skills building, confidence building, and relationship building. Day 3 had each sister speaking before the group. Magic happened. Laureen Evans, a local union sister on the committee, described her experience in an interview. "I want you to know that was the longest walk I've had to take. I was sick every step I took. It was long. I would not have been able to do that if it had not been for the program letting me know I can do it, that it wasn't just about education. It was showing me that I can do it, saying you can get involved. You don't have to take a back seat. You can sit up front. I think my classmates think they've created a monster because I've been on the go ever since." In 93, we piloted the course in the US and held train the trainer programs. Magic always happened. Sisters in their talks revealed unbearable, painful experiences: shop floor rape, domestic violence, violent racial injustice, brutal homophobia. We transformed into allies and healers and family. This separate space for sisters was not, as some feared, about separating ourselves, but about finding ways to move through pain, past obstacles, and become vibrant activists. We set out to transform our union so that it reflected in word and deed a renewed, dynamic, anti-sexist, anti-racist vision that welcomed and promoted our involvement. Through sisterhood and solidarity, with help from terrific allies, Michael Lewis, Mike Wright, and others, by developing our collective strength to produce change, we helped that process. In 93, I received a letter from staff rep Buddy Watson King, who served on the Women's Education Committee. "Dear Nancy, can you believe it? I'm having a hard time with it. I've seen so many startups only to suffer a complete close down that it seems almost impossible to me that we have reached the point where I feel secure. I'm so proud the Women of Steel program is going to actually become a reality. I'm pinching myself to fully digest what this means. From those of us who truly did not believe that we would live long enough to see this program become a fact, to those of you who conceded nothing, a sound and heartfelt thank you. And I say to all on whose shoulders we stood and all who have continued to build this unfinished movement within a movement, Thank you for making our union and our world more equitable, just, safe, and welcoming of our diversity and leadership, solidarity and sisterhood forever. And now, our great mentor, Carol Landry.
Thank you, Nancy. Good evening, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Carol Landry. I'm a retired member of Local 7619 and retired International Vice President at Large. I want to say a special thank you to all the women who have shared their stories with us this evening. And we should be mindful that for every story we've heard here, there are hundreds of other sisters across our union who have similar stories. I want to also recognize and thank the sisters who have come before us and helped pave the way for us in spite of the many barriers and obstacles that they had to face along the way. I became a member of the United Steelworkers in 1986 when I went to work in an open pit copper mine in British Columbia, Canada. At that time, there was about 1,400 union members there, but only about 40 women. And all of the women, of course, worked in office and technical, doing women's work. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for women to move out of that department into production and maintenance, which of course was, the pay was better, more opportunity for advancement, just a whole lot of benefits that the women didn't get in office and technical. The attitude from management and from some of the union men at the time about having women in the mine, it can be summed up like this. And this is a statement, by the way, that was made by one of the superintendents at the mine. He said, "Let them come work here. They'll only stay long enough to earn enough money to buy a new washing machine, then they'll go back home where they belong." Well, it didn't take me long after I was hired to realize that is exactly how women were treated in all areas of the mine. I started going to local union meetings, raising concerns and asking our local union leadership for help. In 1988, as the local was preparing for negotiations, a group of members from Office and Technical approached me and they asked me to put my name forward for the bargaining committee. I did, and I became the first woman to be on our local's bargaining committee. At that time, the committee was pretty large. There were 13 members representing each department of the mine. And I soon learned my first challenge was going to be to educate our committee and our membership. In the end, though, the brothers did not let me down, and they fought hard with me to end many of the inequities and injustices at the mine site. We were successful in opening doors for women at that set of negotiations, and there have been many women since who have continued that hard work and continue to push open those doors, where today it's quite common to see women working anywhere on a mine site. But that set of negotiations was also the start of a fight that kept me going for the next 35 years. And just to follow up from Marlene and Nancy, the Women of Steel course came to District 3 in 1991. I was one of the sisters chosen by the district director, Ken Newman, and I attended that course. Well, let me tell you, that was a life-changing experience for me. An experience that over years has sometimes made my head spin. It has brought me to tears, pissed me off a few times, but most of all, it's been the most rewarding years of my life. I took many things away from the Women of Steel course. More knowledge about our union, how politics work in the union, strategizing and planning to reach goals, but the most important thing was my feeling of self-confidence and knowing that I was now part of a global circle of women that faced the same challenges as I did in the workplace and in our union. Following the Women of Steel course, I became an instructor in our Back to the Local education program. In 1998, when I was vice president of our local, I ran for president and was successful in winning the position over the president who had been there for 3 terms. In 1999, I was hired as a staff representative in British Columbia, and in 2004, I became the District 3 Education Coordinator. In 2006, I became assistant to the District Director, Steve Hunt, who, by the way, had been my staff rep when I worked at the mine and was one of my mentors throughout the years. In 2008, I was appointed International Vice President at Large, and as you heard from the sisters who spoke before me, there had been a lot of pressure for a lot of years on the international union leadership to give women the same opportunity as our brothers to hold leadership positions at all levels of the union. It was a long time in coming, but I am confident that the door is now open and we will see many more women take on these leadership positions in the future. We now have two amazing women of steel on the International Executive Board, Sisters Leeann Foster and Roxanne Brown. Now, over the years, many times I've heard Leo Gerard say that one day there will be a woman sitting in the International President's seat. And I always replied, I would like to see it in my lifetime. And for a long time, I had doubts. But now I'm a little more hopeful that we will get to see it, that I will get to see it in my lifetime. Us women of steel, we will keep pushing and we will keep fighting to make that happen. I want to end tonight with the same message I always gave our members at the end of every presentation I got to make. And that is, every day, say something good about your union. Thank you all. I would now like to introduce, who you've already met, Ann Fleener, the director of the Women of Steel, who has brought the Women of Steel program to a whole new level with her leadership. Ann.
Thank you, Carol. It's with a lot of support and a lot of sisters and you pushing me from behind. As stated before, I'm Ann Fleener Gitlin, Director of Women of Steel. I became a URW, United Rubber Workers member in 1972 at Local 302L at Rubbermaid Incorporated, District 1. Yes, that means I've been a union member for 49 years. I remember when they bid men's and women's jobs, same work, different rates of pay. And I saw that change in the early 70s to equal work, equal pay. My local union was on strike twice in the 1970s and again in 1982. So I spent my early years in the union doing picket duty. I went to my union meetings, became a steward, but beyond that, only a certain few union brothers were sent to education programs. And the same men were always elected as officers of our local union. I wanted to learn how to be a better union representative, but for many years was denied the opportunity to attend the union schools. Luckily, CLU, Coalition of Labor Union Women, had a terrific education program and worked closely with Ohio State University's labor education program. So I paid my own way to attend. I learned how to put motions on the floor, to break up the stronghold at local union meetings. I soon realized that others would back me up, and doors started opening for more people to attend union functions. I successfully ran for various local union offices, but in one instance, a local union officer told me women shouldn't run for local union office because of the foul language that may need to be used in union management meetings. He was one of the two men I ran against and beat for local union president. Around the same time I was sworn in as local union president, the rubber workers merged with the steel workers, and I felt like I'd been handed a gift. You see, it was my goal to run our union differently. And all of a sudden there were programs that I could involve more members in and give them opportunities to participate in the union. Rapid response, health and safety, education programs, summer schools, and Women of Steel. When I came up through the union, we didn't have a women's education program from within, and we certainly didn't have a network to share ideas with. We had to figure it all out on our own. I was hired here at the headquarters in 1998 as National Rapid Response Coordinator, and subsequently served as Assistant Organizing Director, all the while observing the struggles of getting the Women of Steel program up and running throughout all the districts in our union. There was a resistance among local unions and some districts. I was asked to be director of Women of Steel in 2006 upon Sharon Stiller's retirement. Timing was great for me because in 2005, the USW Constitution was changed to require that local unions with female members to have a local union women's committee. When Leeann Foster and Emily Jefferson and I put our heads together in 2006, we knew we wanted more. All of us felt the measure of success would be, are union sisters showing up? Are they running for local union office? Are we building a network of support for each other and opening doors for others to be activists? We now have local union women's committees, district women of steel coordinators, international women's conferences, and district meetings. We have a Women of Steel program, a network of support, and 2 women on the International Executive Board of the USW. Can you imagine how proud our sisters would be to see what has been built from what they started? We have so much more to do. Now I'd like to introduce my sister, Wanda Howard.
Thank you, Ann. Hello, everyone. My name is Wanda Howard. I work for Regional Water Authority, Public Sector, Local 12160 in New Haven, Connecticut. I've been involved in Women of Steel since 2006. When I attended my first Women of Steel education course, I was a union steward and extremely shy. The course training was my first introduction to public speaking. When my coworker, mentor, Arlene Miller, decided to retire, she asked me to replace her as the Women of Steel chair for our local. I was eager to get more involved. Women of Steel took me places I could have never imagined. I was appointed by Director Shin to serve on the International Convention Resolution Committee twice. I was also appointed by him to serve the union on the Emergency Response Team, or ERT, an honor and an experience I'll never forget. I also went on to hold several local union positions besides Union Steward and Women of Steel chair. I served my local union as internal organizer, recording secretary, and vice president. I attended the 4-year leadership scholarship course, which equipped me with training and knowledge I needed to effectively lead the local in my current position as president. Being the first woman, as well as the first woman of color to hold this position in my local, is memorable. But I'm most proud of having the first executive board of 4 out of 5 as women for the first time ever. Becoming a Women of Steel facilitator afforded me the opportunity to share my knowledge and experience with the next generation of leaders. That experience was priceless. Everything I said is only a small snapshot of my journey as a Woman of Steel. There has been some excitement, some disappointment, many challenges along the way. I can't call the names of all the women that mentored me along the way because it's been so many I've come to know and love. You see, Women of Steel to me is a big family of sisters. Each person you meet along the way gives you a little bit of them as they go about creating leaders and political activists. A sincere, heartfelt thank you to the Women of Steel because their leadership and training have been the key in my development as a leader. I thank God for the open door and pray I'm paying it forward. Next, we have my Women of Steel sister, Mariel Cruz.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Wanda, for the introduction. My name is Mariel Cruz, Council Chair of Women of Steel in Puerto Rico, and the first woman president of my local 6A71. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. As our union is international and the best of all, I will give my speech in Spanish, my first language, in solidarity with my sisters and brothers who speak Spanish. El rol de la mujer
So the role of women in our times is full of challenges, starting from our position in society, and we are no longer a figure devoted at home to have an impact in the working area. And having the voice of the ones that
y hasta
decide
llegar a
to
ser líderes de
not
una
talk
nación.
and to be even
En
leaders
Puerto
of a
Rico,
nation. In
el
Puerto
rol de la
Rico,
mujer
the
ha sido
role
uno de
of
evolución,
women
hasta
has
dejar
evolved,
huellas
and we also
historia.
have left
Women of
marks in
Steel Puerto
history.
Rico
Women
no
women
ha
of
sido
Steel Puerto
fácil
Rico was not
el camino,
easy.
y
It
con
was
el
not
pasar de
easy
los
at all.
días
And with the
aprendemos
days,
de nuestra
we
historia
learn from
a
our
dejar esa
history,
huella
and we
importante
learn to
en
leave
nuestros
that
tiempos.
mark in today's
Contamos con extraordinarias
today.
mujeres,
We have
líderes
extraordinary
comunitarias,
women,
trabajadores
community
de todos
leaders,
los sectores,
workers of all
mujeres de
the
lucha,
sectors,
que a lo
women
largo de
that
los
struggle,
años
that
se
throughout
han
the years
encargado
they
en ayudar y a
they have
impactar vidas
helped
en
and they
esta
have
pequeña isla.
changed the life of people in this small
Vivo ejemplo
island.
de esto,
We have
nuestras
a
hermanas
great
del área sur de
example,
la isla,
our sisters from the
las cuales
southern
se han
part of the
destacado
island.
en
They
servir a la
really
comunidad
have
de una
served
manera
the
encomiable.
community in an
Han brindado
extraordinary
desde
way.
talleres
They
educativos
have
con temas
organized
importantes
education
en salud y
workshops
seguridad,
related to
hasta su
safety and
actividad más
security,
reciente,
and the
lo
most
cual fue
recent
preparar
activity
kits
was to
personal,
prepare personal kits, and there is no sound. There is no more.
mascarillas,
Okay, they
hand
prepared
sanitizer,
personal kits,
lazos para mantener el cabello
sanitized
recogido,
products,
entre otros.
masks, and among other
De
things.
más está decir
And
que
we have
ellas
to
forman
mention
una
that they are
gran parte
part,
importante
they are an
de Women of
important
Steel
part
Puerto
of
Rico.
women of Steel
En
Puerto
adición,
Rico.
en
And I
estos
would like to
tiempos
say that
pandémicos
during these pandemic
nos han
times,
enseñado
they
a
have teach us to
reinventarnos.
reinvent
Y este es el
ourselves.
caso
This
del
is the
movimiento que
case
creamos
of
en
the
las redes
movement that we
sociales
created in
con el
the
nombre
social network with the
Ponte
name
tu camisa violeta.
Wear Your Purple
Mismo
T-shirt.
consiste en que
And
hoy,
well, today,
8 de marzo,
8
debes
March
ponerte
8,
cualquier
you
camisa
have to
violeta,
use any purple
tomarse una
shirt,
foto
take
y
a
subirla
picture
a las redes
and
sociales
upload it
con
on
el
your
hashtag
social network with the hashtag
Eres Líderes
Women
2021.
Leader 2021.
Esto en apoyo y
This is
solidaridad
to
con
support
todas
and in
estas
solidarity
guerreras
with all
que
the
han dado
warriors
y
that have
continúan dando
been
el frente a
working
esta pandemia.
during this
A todas
pandemic.
ellas,
And to all of them,
gracias.
thank you.
Gracias por
Thank you
representarnos
because you
dignamente
represent
a
us with
través del
such
mundo
dignity
con su
in the whole
trabajo,
world, with
su
your work,
sacrificio.
with your
Hoy
sacrifice.
yo
And
las honro.
today,
Por mi parte,
I really
eso es todo.
appreciate what you have done. So this
Thank
is
you
all
for
I
this
have
opportunity.
to say.
And you're still in time to join our movement, hashtag Mujeres Líderes 2021. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you, our sister, Adrienne Pavo.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne. I'm the head of the National Education and Equality Department for the Union in Canada, which includes the Women of Steel program. And I really appreciate the invitation to join you tonight. It's so important that we remind ourselves of the history because it's the foundation on which we do the work we're trying to do today. It's especially great to be able to come together during the pandemic because we know the pandemic has been really hard on women workers and especially on racialized women workers, rolling back the gains that Women of Steel and all women have struggled to win over the decades. Women workers are most affected by layoffs and not recalled. Women workers are most likely to be frontline workers and minimum wage workers. We're most likely to give up paid work to take care of children and other family needs. And so women around the world are demanding that a post-pandemic recovery focuses on women, doesn't leave us out. And we who are activists in trade unions know that the pandemic could prevent women from running for local union office and from volunteering for activist roles because of the increased load it's putting on women. That would be a terrible step backwards. So I'm really glad that the USW is adding our voice to the calls for a recovery that reduces, not entrenches, women's social and economic inequality. As we keep our eyes on this looming problem, Women of Steel in Canada have been busy on some other things as well, and I'd like to tell you about two of them. Raising the Bar on Women's Health and Safety is a new campaign to draw attention to women's particular health and safety needs. A new campaign, but from what I've heard tonight, obviously it's a lot of the same old issues. So whether it's pregnancy or menopause or menstruation or not enough toilets and change rooms or gloves and uniforms that don't fit or sexual and racial harassment at work or mental health injuries from juggling work and family or ergonomic risks from equipment and workplaces designed without our body shapes and sizes in mind, women need our health and safety issues heard, understood, and acted on. Our campaign is also about increasing respect for women's voices and increasing women's participation in workplace health and safety. Listen when we talk about our concerns. Invite and encourage us to be part of health and safety committees. And you can find resources about this campaign at the website that I'm going to put a link to right now in the chat. So www.usw.ca/raisethebar. And I want to especially say thanks to Unite the Union in the UK for the inspiration for this campaign. Another exciting development for USW in Canada is the creation of a fund that women and men can apply to be reimbursed the costs of childcare or family care that they need in order to take part in authorized union activities, like membership meetings, like committee meetings, courses, conferences, conventions. Why do we repay mileage and not childcare too? We're excited about the fund, and we're also encouraging local unions to amend their bylaws to make reimbursement of child and family care expenses just part of the normal way we do things in the United Steelworkers. But because our well-being and our struggle are linked to the well-being and struggles of all women on the planet, I'm really excited that we've asked a few sisters that do work around the world to join us. And right now, I'm really happy to turn things over to Imalda Jimenez from Los Mineros.
Hi, sisters. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I am Imelda Jimenez. I am a trade union woman that has devoted her life the last 7 years to defend the freedom of the trade union in my community. When we started this strong struggle, to be honest, the first year, 2014, was a very difficult one, and we had a lot of reprisals and we were dismissed. And when I was, there were threats, retaliation, because where I live, it is very difficult to have the freedom of trade union. And here, all the workers, we have to go to the trade union that is imposed to us. As soon as you start a job, to belong to the trade union. So this is the struggle where I am right now. I'm really fighting. And the next goal is justice. But let me tell you something. What I have learned in this journey is something beautiful that happened that year, even if I got fired. When I went to the Mineros trade union to have this Women of Steel project in 2014. So from that moment, sisters, I am going to be very honest, it changes everything in my trade union, because now our president and general secretary, Napoleon Gomez Urrutia, his wife, they felt so committed. So they brought this project to have great results, and many of the sisters in the mining sector. We are now in very important places in our trade union. So the most beautiful thing that happened in the last year, 2020, is that now we have the first women in our national executive community. Carla Judith, Sister Carla Judith, she's in social prevention official, and I feel we are really in the right path. And I would like to commit myself, sister, to continue to get ready to prepare myself, because I want to merit the name of Women of Steel. I will continue doing what I like, because this is what I like. Really help my sisters to defend this freedom, this trade union freedom. And I believe in justice. I believe in trade union. I believe in Women of Steel. I believe in international alliances. Therefore, I will continue my struggle. It's a great pleasure to see I have very dear friends here. I want to send a big hug to all of you and thank you to count on us, Women Minera. Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Sister Jovan Endev. Thank you.
Thank you, Imelda, and good evening, sisters. That was such an inspirational speech, Imelda. And I just wanted to bring from Unite the Union in the UK and Ireland our solidarity greetings on International Women's Day to you all, and to say that, you know, our strong and solidarity bonds between our sister unions is what makes us strong. We've got a long tradition of working through workers uniting between the United Steelworkers and Unite the Union, and we learn so much from each other in our exchanges. I've come to a Women of Steel conference before and been inspired, although I remember getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going and campaigning on the streets as we did in Toronto one year. And we learned from that experience and we share our experiences today. And so I just wanted to say, in case you're wondering, we're definitely Team Megan. But of course, she's experienced a huge amount of institutional racism. And it's institutional racism that she's had the opportunity to challenge. But what we do in the trade union movement is ensure that all women can challenge institutional racism by working together as a collective. And also, I'd just like to say we're definitely Team Kamala Harris, and congratulations on her election. It's a fantastic result, although we all held our breaths for a little while. I saw on the news so many Sisters of Steel and USW activists out on the streets campaigning during that election. But of course, we find ourselves now in a situation where there are tough political choices to be made. There's a real danger that we can lose the progress that have been made by so many of our strong sisters down the generations of trade unions. As we see, certainly in the UK, we have a government that cares not one jot for women workers and will not stand up for us, has done nothing throughout the pandemic to support us when we've been looking after our families, keeping the essential services going, looking after our children as they've not been in school, and looking after our communities and ensuring that our neighbours have been fed and continued to be looked after. And so the real risk is that as the economy begins to reopen, that we lose our jobs, that we're certainly experiencing pay freezes in the UK. And the only thing that stands between us and losing our jobs is a strong trade union. So in International Women's Day this year, we are reaching out to all of our women members who've become inspired that actually you can make change. You can ensure that your employer carries out equality impact assessments if they're changing the workplace to deal with safety measures. And getting them active, making sure that we're building that collective at a workplace, but also through our unions, nationally and internationally, to ensure that we do build back better, but we build back through a strong trade union organized workforce that's educated and organized to make the change that we need to see. So thank you, sisters. Thank you for a fantastic evening. It's been really inspiring. And I've thoroughly enjoyed listening and hearing all the stories. And I know that we'd absolutely stand on the shoulders of giants of women in our trade union movement. But thank you for listening. And now it's my job to introduce Laura Ramirez from the Humanity Fund. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Shoban, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here. This has been a wonderful event, and it has been a pleasure to hear from so many great women of steel. So again, my name is Laura Ramirez. I work in the Canadian National Office of the Steelworkers as the Latin America Program Coordinator for the Humanity Fund. For those of you who are not familiar with the Humanity Fund, it is the organization that allows the Canadian steelworkers to support social justice initiatives around the world and share its knowledge and values in other countries. Through the Humanity Fund, we work with the labor and community organizations to improve the rights of workers and community members through different development projects. The Humanity Fund has supported projects that include women and that promote women's rights through the years. But it was only in 2014 that I had the opportunity to develop a program that focused on specific women's issues. And it started with the participation of a couple of women of steel in an exchange to El Salvador about the different kinds, that talked about the different kinds of violence that women experience, such as structural violence, physical and psychological violence, violence in communications. And this was a great experience to learn what the realities are throughout Latin America. So this was the beginning of a series of exchanges that allowed Canadian women of steel to share and learn about the realities of women in Canada and Latin America. These exchanges also provided an opportunity to learn about health and safety and leadership from a women's perspective. It taught them that they had the right to health and safety. They had the right to have leadership roles in their organizations, in their communities. It allowed them to analyze ways to support women victims of violence in the workplace, as well as develop strategies to fight it. These exchanges allowed all these women to build long-lasting and very strong connections. And this was among Canadian steelworkers and all women in partner organizations of the Humanity Fund, which also included sisters from Los Mineros. And these visits to different countries allowed the women of steel to see firsthand the realities of women in countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, and Nicaragua, and realize that women's challenges and struggles, in spite of everything, are the same everywhere. You know, whether it's Canada or Guatemala or whatever, you know, women confront these realities on a daily basis, whether it's violence, discrimination, poverty, and so many types of structural violence. The Humanity Fund also supports labor projects in countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Bolivia that help improve working conditions for women who are artisanal miners, who work in maquiladoras, who recycle garbage in peasant communities, and many other sectors, right? The Humanity Fund allows them to promote their rights and give them a voice to participate in decision-making spaces. In Canada, the Humanity Fund works to fight for the rights of Indigenous women in mining communities, women migrant workers. It also supports projects that address food insecurity, and we know that women are big users of food banks, right, and are the ones who suffer poverty in the harshest way. Most recently, through the COVID-19 pandemic, the Humanity Fund has been supporting initiatives to provide basic hygiene kits, information, and all kinds of support to help women, their families, and their communities go through this horrendous crisis that has hit many countries in Latin America in a much worse way than in North America. So I could go on forever since I love my job. So it has been an honor and a privilege for me to work for the United Steelworkers and the Humanity Fund for more than 32 years, building connections and improving the lives of women in Canada and many other countries. Thank you again for allowing me to talk about this very important work of the steelworkers. And now I'll turn it over to Ann Flener.
Thank you, Laura. I just want to remind people that if you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat. If you have a story to tell, make sure you put your name in and put remarks or story beside it. We'll give you a minute to tell a quick story. Or if you have questions, put it in the chat, please. We began this evening with the story of Ola Kennedy. She was there for the formation of CLUE and dreamed of the union having its own women's department. She gave that interview nearly 50 years ago. It's taken thousands of sisters and those in our union family that have been allies, those like you on this call, to make it happen. Tonight, we have the women who carry on Ola's dream. Elise Bryant, president of CLUE, and our very own vice president, Leeann Foster. So right now, I'll turn it over to Elise.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you so much. It's just wonderful to be here. And thank you for the invitation to join you all tonight. I am a union woman of steel, just as proud as I can be. I do not like the bosses, and the bosses don't like me. Good evening, buenos noches, assalamu alaikum, howdy. Sisters, brothers, siblings, family, I bring you greetings on behalf of the Coalition of Labor Union Women and join you in this celebration of Women's History Month and International Women's Day. Wow. I love hearing the history of women of steel. When I think of steelworkers, I'm reminded of growing up in Southwest Detroit in the 60s. Images of smokestacks, freeways, the redness of the night sky, when the Great Lakes Steel Plant would open the roof of the plant to let out the heat. I don't know, but it turned the whole sky red. Some friends from college came home with me one time, and we were standing on our front porch, and they saw the sky go red, and they thought they were having a religious experience. I told them, nope, it's just the steel mill. People often ask me, Elise, why do you sing so much? Well, it wasn't because I grew up in Motown. I was told at a very young age that I could not sing because, see, in Detroit, if you could not sing like Aretha Franklin, you couldn't sing. So I didn't sing publicly solo until I went to South Africa in 2004. I went to Johannesburg to teach a health and safety class. And one day we went on a tour of a steel mill with a group of other South African trade unionists. For most of us, it was our first time in a steel mill. And we were so close. We were on this catwalk. We were so close to the pouring of the molten steel that we could literally feel the heat. Some people were actually scared. When we went outside, there was one lone guy pulling hot slabs of steel off the conveyor belt. As we stood watching him, my South African comrades began singing to him. I asked them, what are you singing? They said, oh, it's a toy. I said, well, you always say it's a toy, but what does it mean? They said, oh, we're saying that the work is nasty and the pay is low. And I realized that not only did they sing to him, but where in the United States would a group of trade unionists going on a tour of a steel mill or any other workplace start singing to a coworker to serenade him? And I realized that not only did they sang at every coffee break. And they always sang in 4-part harmony. When I say to them, how do you know what part to sing? And they go, what do you mean, what part? I said, you know, like alto, soprano. They didn't know what I was talking about. So I realized I sing not because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. We're the women of the union in the forefront of every fight. We fight for women's issues. We fight for women's rights. We're prepared to fight for freedom. We're prepared to stand our ground, 'cause women make the union strong. I'm a union member for over 30 years. Before I ran for a contested position, I served on our executive board for 10 years, but no one ever ran for the position I got, so I got it by acclamation. I decided to run for vice president of my local, CWA Local 32035, in 2017 because Hillary Clinton ran for president and lost. I went to bed on November 8th and I was depressed. So I decided to run. I thought, how can I tell other women to run for office when I wasn't willing to do it myself? I lost that election for vice president. I turned around and I ran for president of CLU. And I ran again for vice president in my local, and I won both. CLU was founded on the belief that a woman's place is in her union. And that's still true. But now we say a woman's place is in Congress. A woman's place is in the Senate. A woman's place is in the White House. And as proud as we are of Kamala Harris, she said, I broke that ceiling, but I won't be the last. And that's true in our unions. We must run for office and become the president of the Steelworkers. There's a woman out here right now who's going to be president of the Steelworkers in my lifetime, and if I come out there with my wheelchair and my walker, I'll sing at your inauguration. CLU was founded on the belief, and we continue to work for that. But we need more. I sing in loving memory of Ann Feeney from Pittsburgh and all the people we've lost to the pandemic. I'll close with the words of the late Dottie Jones, one of my sheroes out of the UAW. We will turn off all my children, one life to live in General Hospital and get involved, so that all our children and grandchildren will have one life to live with health care for all, so they can run for and go to any general hospital they choose. We will remember our everyday sheroes, our guiding light, so that as the world turns, the young and the old will not be restless because Biden's hope, not Ryan's, but Kamala's bold and beautiful, will guide Santa Barbara along with every state in the union to pass the ERA so that future generations will not have to search for tomorrow because another world, a better world, will be here. They divide us by our color. They divide us by our tongue. They divide us men and women. They divide us old and young. But they'll tremble at our voices when they hear these verses sung. For the union makes us strong. Solidaridad para siempre. Solidaridad para siempre. Solidaridad para siempre. Que viva nuestra unión. Up next is my sister, International Vice President, Leeann Foster. Leeann, it's all yours, sis.
Thank you so much, Elise. Wasn't she amazing? What an amazing voice. I promise you, I'm not going to torture you by using my singing voice tonight. But I'm Leeann Foster, and I'm a proud member of Local 11-436. And I'm honored to be one of two women who currently serve as International Vice Presidents of our great union. Roxanne Brown is also an International Vice President and runs our legislative and political affairs programs. I lead the paper sector within our union, including chairing major bargaining and leading our safety, legislative, and trade efforts in the industry. Roxy and I truly stand on the shoulders of all the sisters who came before us, and we carry you with us every day in our hearts as we execute our roles. The Women of Steel Department is also among my responsibilities, and it is a true privilege and inspiration to be a part of this work. I also hold an elected local government office. I currently serve as a commissioner in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. A big shout out to Amber Miller, our rapid response director, who was my campaign manager. I grew up in the Paperworkers Union, the UPIU, that became PACE after it joined with the OCAW and merged with the USWA to form the USW in 2005. Growing up, we were always union. My dad was a leader in his local, but it was when I worked at the box plant to put myself through college and law school that I saw the power of the union on the shop floor. This urged me to become a union lawyer. I then joined the Paperworkers as an attorney
and became an executive assistant to our president, Boyd Young, at the age of 28. President Young and I worked together to create a voluntary affirmative action plan so we would have more people of color and women at our headquarters and as staff representatives and organizers. We also established a complaint procedure at all levels of the union. I want to say I could not have done this without Boyd's support and vision. He believed in these issues and empowered a young woman to carry them out. The UPIU, OCAW, and then PACE had regional networks in our Region 10 and Region 3 with active and proud histories of women activists. But as Ann said, the merger to form USW was a gift to us. We moved from caucusing to a leadership and activism arm with Women of Steel, particularly the Women of Steel Leadership Development course, which allowed us to join with and make the district Women of Steel programs even stronger. I remember in 2005, after the merger, talking to men in the former PACE about Women of Steel. They would ask, why don't we have a Men of Steel? I responded, we don't have Women of Steel to be divided, but to conquer better together. Why would you go into a fight with one arm tied behind your back? Women bring so much to the table, and we often have different approaches, skills, and abilities. We need to empower that because we have a better chance of succeeding as a union together with everyone's ideas. Like many of you, I have had so many brothers in the union who have been true allies, who see our sisters as assets to be developed and help me along the way. For me, it's been people like President Young, President Gerard, Lynn Agee, John Geenan, and now President Conway, who are purposely inclusive towards a better union. Our women's conference has been a highlight in my union career. They are reflective of the powerful force sisters are in our union as committed activists and leaders. Last conference, we put a call to action for women's equity together and committed ourselves to ending violence against women and girls, women's safety and health at work, inclusion of women when planning and running events, programs, and policies, promoting women in leadership and activism, changing the channel on hatred, closing the gender wage gap, and standing with our sisters around the world. Our vision for the future is based on these issues. We need more and more sisters in leadership at all levels of the union. One woman is a start, two is a wonderful thing, and we've come a long way. But if we're going to build systemic change, we need more women at every table, at every level of the union. This includes politics. As we think about the future, we need more sisters to run for local, state, and federal office. My experience as an elected official has taught me that union leaders bring a much needed set of skills to the job. We bring a unique perspective to holding office and representing people and engaging with the community, especially on working on solutions together for the better good. I have also learned a lot that I can bring back to the union, but more importantly, people in my community are learning about the steelworkers, the labor movement, and what we bring to the table. I've always dreamed of a Girls of Steel program, where young girls who are not fortunate to be a part of a union family can be introduced to the union at an early age, understand it, and make it a part of their future. After all, a union is the best form of equity a woman can have on the job. Finally, with Women of Steel, we've always focused on a woman's experience once she gets on the shop floor. But what can we do to get more women through the door and working in our industries? Right now in the paper sector, we are starting a joint effort with industry to do just that. The industry will be better for it, but these types of jobs also end economic insecurity for women, which is the cause of so many domestic violence situations. We hope to bring this initiative to other sectors. I want to thank all of you for showing up and being a critical part of the union and our future. And thank you to our speakers tonight who brought forward the rich and varied history and experiences of what it means to be a woman of steel. And thank you to everyone who worked so hard to make this event possible. Now I'll send it back to my sister, Ann Fleener Gitlin.
Thank you, Leeann. It's always an honor and a pleasure to work with you. I appreciate it. Anyway, once again, we are looking for any comments or questions, but also I missed a point that I want to say is we've also adapted our Women of Steel leadership course And Emily has traveled to Nigeria and Liberia to train the leadership course there. So we are truly reaching out internationally to our sisters around the world. And I'm very proud of the sisters in the countries that we're visiting and training with. And also thank you to everybody for joining us tonight. And thank you to our brother allies that have joined us and supported us through our union years and union struggles. And seeing no questions or comments, I would like for the slide to go up just to introduce the next courses that will be coming up. Tonight was History of Women of Steel. We're going to be doing our Putting Breast Cancer Out of Work. The movie Stand, Duties of Local Union Administrative Offices will be offered again. We've got one coming up tomorrow. Steward training levels 1 through 5 and various other courses. You can go to USW Women of Steel on Facebook, and it's a closed group where you can share your stories. Feel free to ask questions. It's a closed group and it's a safe place, but we'll also list the classes there. And you can check in with your Women of Steel district coordinators for upcoming courses. But the courses are open for both union brothers and sisters, so I would encourage you to take advantage of them. This is an example of how the courses are run, and I really thank the Education Membership Development Department for supporting Women of Steel and joining with us tonight to make this a successful event. And once again, thank you, everyone. Lisa, are there any questions or comments?
I don't see anybody, but if anyone would like to pipe in, we've got a couple of minutes. Not hearing any. I would like to say that, like Ann said in the beginning, we're hoping this is just the beginning of collecting stories. So if you have a story as a woman of steel, please let us know so we can make sure that your voice gets captured, just like Ola Kennedy's was. We want to make sure that we capture these stories so 50 years from now, we can talk about what great progress we made. Thanks, Ann. I don't see any questions or anybody asking to tell a story, so.
Thank you, everyone. Pam?
Pam?
Can't hear you, Pam.
Sorry, used to having it up. What email address, if someone has a story, what email address do you want them to be using?
They can send to me at Fleener, Flener, at usw.org. I'll put it in chat or someone can put it in.
I put it in chat.
Thank you very much. I'll share your stories and maybe you'll get an opportunity to join us in the oral interviews that we're hoping to collect.